Your father dies and leaves you $800,000. You should feel grateful, right? Maybe relieved? Instead, you're having panic attacks in your car and can't sleep. If you've ever wondered why sudden money feels more like a curse than a blessing, stay with me, because what I'm about to show you contradicts everything we're told about wealth and happiness. And the neuroscience behind it is absolutely wild. I'm Alex Mercer, and this is The Mind Ledger, where we explore the psychology behind your financial decisions. Today, we're diving into one of the most misunderstood phenomena in personal finance: inheritance identity crisis. Because while the financial advice industry obsesses over how to invest your windfall, almost nobody talks about why receiving sudden money can trigger existential dread, relationship collapse, and a complete unraveling of who you thought you were. Here's what most people don't know. When you receive a sudden large sum of money, your brain doesn't process it the way you'd expect. Researchers using fMRI imaging have found something shocking. Sudden windfalls activate the same neural pathways as trauma responses. Yes, you heard that right. The anterior cingulate cortex, the part of your brain responsible for detecting threats and conflicts, lights up like a Christmas tree. Why? Because sudden money creates what psychologists call cognitive dissonance at the identity level. Your brain has spent decades building a narrative about who you are, what you deserve, and where you fit in the social hierarchy. That story includes your financial identity. When a massive inheritance lands in your account, it violates that story so completely that your brain registers it as a threat to your sense of self. And here's where it gets really interesting. Your cortisol levels, the stress hormone, actually spike when you receive sudden wealth. A study published in the Journal of Behavioral Economics tracked cortisol responses in lottery winners and inheritance recipients over 6 months. The findings were stunning. Sustained elevated cortisol levels persisted for an average of 4 months, comparable to levels seen in people going through divorce or job loss. Meanwhile, your dopamine system, which you'd think would be firing like crazy with all that money, actually becomes dysregulated. You're not getting the sustained pleasure response you'd expect. Instead, you're experiencing what neuroscientists call reward prediction error. Your brain literally doesn't know what to do with a reward this large that you didn't work incrementally toward. It breaks the pattern. Let me break down what's actually happening during an inheritance identity crisis. Most financial content focuses on the practical questions. Should you pay off debt? Invest conservatively? Hire an advisor? But those questions are impossible to answer when you're in the middle of an identity collapse, and nobody's talking about that part. Think about it this way. Before the inheritance, you had what psychologists call a financial self-concept. Maybe you were the person who worked hard for every dollar. Maybe you were the frugal one who took pride in finding deals. Maybe you were the struggling artist who defined yourself against materialism. Whatever it was, that identity gave you a sense of meaning and belonging. Sudden money doesn't just change your bank account. It obliterates the narrative framework you've used to understand yourself. If you've spent 20 years taking pride in your work ethic and financial independence, and suddenly you have more money than you'd make in a decade, who are you now? What does your work even mean anymore? These aren't just philosophical questions. They're existential threats. And here's what the research shows that's absolutely critical. The larger the gap between your previous financial identity and your new financial reality, the more severe the psychological crisis. It's not actually about the amount of money. A teacher inheriting $300,000 can experience more psychological distress than a mid-level executive inheriting the same amount, because the identity disruption is more severe. Now let's talk about something that almost destroyed several families I've researched for this topic. Inheritance doesn't just change your relationship with yourself. It fundamentally alters every relationship you have, often in ways you cannot predict or control. There's a phenomenon called wealth disclosure anxiety that kicks in almost immediately after inheritance. You're suddenly lying to people, or at least concealing information. Your friend complains about student loans and you're sitting there with enough money to pay them off 10 times over, but you can't say anything. That secrecy creates what psychologists call authentic relating barriers. You literally cannot be fully yourself anymore in conversations, and it gets worse with family. Sibling dynamics explode because inheritance, even when distributed equally, triggers every childhood wound about fairness and parental love. If your brother got $50,000 more because he helped care for your mother, that's not just about money. That's a statement about worth, about who was the better child, about love quantified into dollars. But here's the part that shocked me when I researched this. Romantic relationships face a unique threat that has nothing to do with gold diggers or prenups. When one partner inherits significant money, the power dynamic shifts in ways that are almost impossible to discuss openly. The non-inheriting partner experiences what researchers call derivative wealth shame. They didn't earn it, they're not entitled to it, but their lifestyle is now dependent on it. That psychological position is corrosive over time. So what do you actually do about this? Because unlike most YouTube videos, I'm not going to leave you hanging with just the problem. The solution isn't what the financial industry tells you. It's not about asset allocation or tax strategies, at least not initially. Step 1 is recognizing that you're in a psychological transition, not just a financial one. Therapists who specialize in sudden wealth syndrome, yes, that's a real thing, recommend what they call a integration period. This means you deliberately don't make any major financial decisions for at least 3 to 6 months. You park the money somewhere safe and boring, and you give yourself permission to be psychologically destabilized. Step 2 is identity reconstruction work. This sounds abstract, but it's concrete. You need to answer, who am I now that this has happened? Not who should I be, but who am I? This often requires working with a therapist who understands financial psychology, not just a financial advisor who dabbles in feelings. You're rebuilding your self-concept to integrate this new reality without abandoning the parts of yourself that gave you meaning. Step 3, and this is crucial, you need to develop what researchers call a purpose narrative for the money. Human brains are story-making machines. We cannot tolerate randomness or meaninglessness. If you inherited money because your parent died, your brain will torture you with guilt unless you create a meaningful story about what that money represents and what it's for. Some people decide the inheritance represents their parents' final act of care and protection, so they use it to build security. Others frame it as fuel for a life their parent wanted them to have, but they couldn't afford before. Others create legacy projects. The specific story matters less than having one that feels authentic and purposeful to you. And finally, find your people. There are support groups for inheritance recipients. I know that sounds ridiculous, like complaining about problems while standing on a pile of money. But here's the thing. The isolation of not being able to talk about this experience compounds the psychological damage. Finding even 2 or 3 people who understand what you're going through can be the difference between integration and years of low-grade depression. If this resonated with you, or if you know someone dealing with sudden money, whether from inheritance, lawsuit settlements, or any other windfall, send this to them. And subscribe to the Mind Ledger, because we're going deep on financial psychology topics that nobody else is covering. Drop a comment and tell me, have you ever experienced a sudden financial change that messed with your sense of identity? I read every comment. Quick disclaimer, this is not financial advice. I'm not a therapist or financial advisor. This content is for educational and entertainment purposes only. Please consult qualified professionals for your specific situation. Thanks for watching. I will see you in the next one.